Hello everybody, welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
Yeah, it's People's Poll on a Tuesday, runners and riders and all that, James.
There was only one rider this week, to be very honest.
Well, yeah, I'm surprised by how much it won by as well.
Well, yeah, that's because people were fairly outraged that it didn't win last week, actually.
Okay.
A lot of DMs I was getting, you are going to put that in the poll again next week, aren't you? Yeah, looks like I'm probably going to have to. So the three options in the poll were the growing concern around fan violence and disorder. There are several links to off-pitch shenanigans. Obviously now fans are returning to stadiums as kind of... we go back towards a normal life, should we say. And learn to live with COVID. Fan disorder is on the increase again. Obviously not compared to the last 2 years, but in comparison to prior to COVID.
Yep.
The other option, I can't remember what the other option was.
Fan violence. Was it football's response to Ukraine?
No. Oh, God, that's a pain. Oh, Super League.
Oh, rearing its
Super
head
League.
again.
Yeah, there was concerns last week that suddenly another announcement was going to drop. Your La Liga president Tebas was coming out, seemed to be saying like they're going to make another announcement. Was calling Barcelona, Juventus, and Real Madrid liars and stuff. He actually compared them, ironically, to Vladimir Putin. He actually said that they lie more than him. But no announcement was forthcoming. But those three clubs, they're not letting it go. Unbelievably.
No.
And can I just say, it's never going to get off the ground unless they physically come up with a proposal that is better than the Champions League and is open and fair to everybody, because they are not going to get the English clubs on board. Clearly, the English clubs are not going to come back to the table on it unless it's something that's a proposal that's fair for everybody and is better than the Champions League, which the reformation of the Champions League from the 24-25 season is it's awful, to be honest with you, but that's what it's going to be at the moment. And obviously one of the clubs that obviously stood up to the opposition of the Super League massively was, of course, Chelsea fans. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be talking about Chelsea today. The winner of the People's Poll is Roman Abramovich, and the potential sale of Chelsea Football Club. And I'd like to start by asking you a question, Suj. Do you think he's actually going to sell Chelsea?
Yeah, I originally didn't. I thought it might have been one of those PR stunts. You know how Mike Ashley had Newcastle up for sale for just about forever? And then whenever any criticism could be levelled at him, he was like, well, I am trying to sell the club. And they're like, get out. And he's going, well, I am trying to sell the club. But whether or not he was actually, how serious he was about selling the club was up for debate. I did think initially that Roman Abramovich was doing exactly the same thing, saying that he was going to sell the club with no real intention to actually sell it. But the speed with which things have moved, and the news reports yesterday that there are actually like serious bids on the table, numerous bids on the table, and the response from Richard Masters at Premier League and what have you actually make me think that it is going to happen and he is going to end up selling it.
But if no one pays the asking price, he wants supposedly at the moment $3 billion, which is a lot, and it's partly a lot because of certainly the stadium issue needs to be done, which that in itself, Chelsea had permission to redevelop Stamford Bridge, was kind of estimated at a cost of about 1.5 billion. Chelsea let the planning permission on that expire during the COVID period, and the kind of sources within the club say they've put that on hold. It's not abandoned, but it's believed now that the cost of that would spiral well beyond £2 billion now. So anybody coming into the football club has got that to do as well. So, I mean, we're paying $5 billion for the football club?
It's crazy money. It's crazy money. But yeah, I do think he's going to sell it. But I think one of the biggest reasons that he's going to sell it is because he's being forced to sell it as opposed to wanting to do it of his own free will.
So why is he being forced to sell the football club?
It's interesting that I think there's a few things that make me think he's being forced to sell it. He hasn't had sanctions put on him yet. And it makes you question why. And I think it's basically because they've told him you've got like 4, 5, 6 weeks, sort your shit out before your sanctions are coming, which is
You
why...
think that conversation's happened
Yeah.
privately off the books? Yeah.
So they probably told him, because he's heavily influential, he's probably got friends in high places, that he needs to liquidate his shit, sell his property, sell the football club as quickly as he can, and as soon as he's done, then there's no question around sanctions on him. And then the way Richard Masters he said himself that he thinks it's the right decision, and he's glad that Roman Abramovich came to that decision to sell the football club. With everything that's going on, it felt like the right thing to do. You think he hasn't had a word with him and said, look, sell it before we force you to sell it? The government have said, sell it quickly. And then there was a conversation around the quickest that they've ever passed through a Premier League club sale is 10 days.
Who was that? I'm not sure.
Richard Masters has said that. So a journalist had asked them the question, I don't know why, for shits and giggles, I guess, what's the fastest that a transaction for a Premier League club has ever gone through? He said it was 10 days of due diligence and checks and whatever else. So there feels like there's an urgency around this whole Chelsea situation.
Yeah, in fairness, not everything's probably going to take as long as it took with Newcastle, for example.
It took last week. Last week he announced it's for sale. Yesterday the news is he's got numerous bids on the table that he can kind of pick and choose from. So it seems to be moving at pace, which makes me think that, someone's had a word with him and said, get on with it, get it done. And move on, and he thought, "Oh, fine, fuck it, that's it, move on."
So why is he specifically being forced? This is because of links to Russia.
Putin.
Links to Putin.
He made his money from because Putin let him help himself to natural resources in Russia, which is how most of the Russian oligarchs got rich, at the expense of Russia.
But does that, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here a little bit, how does that affect him now? I mean, that's something that's going back, 25 years or so, maybe 20 years?
Yeah.
How does that impact on him now?
As in, why, when he did something wrong 25 years ago, why are we punishing him now?
Well, yeah, so why did we let him here in the first place?
Well, that's the question. That's a better question. I mean, it's like, if it was an issue then that his money came from... dodgy sources, then why did we let it in the first place? How did he pass the fit and proper back then, which probably was not fit or proper?
Yeah, well, arguably maybe it's not now.
No, exactly that. So, yeah, the question should have been asked back then, not necessarily now. I think the feeling now is that if they put pressure on the Abramovichs of the world, of which there are many, that it will have a impact on Putin. He'll be like, oh shit, all my mates are getting sanctions put on them and assets frozen and being forced to sell stuff. So I'll withdraw from Ukraine. But that's not going to happen because Putin only cares about Putin, doesn't he?
Clearly.
Yeah.
So Abramovich is owed, and this kind of shows kind of how Chelsea have been bankrolled by him basically over the last 17 years or so. Chelsea Football Club owe Abramovich £1.5 billion.
Yep.
Which is more than...
He has a loan in the club for that much.
Which is more than the debt of Barcelona, to put that into some sort of context for you. But he's happy to write this off, it seems.
Yeah.
And donate the money to
the
people
net
affected.
Proceeds from the sale.
You go on, you'll say it better than I will.
The net proceeds after all costs.
What do you think that equates to if he sells the club for $3 billion then?
Well, he's got to clear off the debt. Well, he said he's writing off the debt.
Yeah.
But the way I see it, if they're inheriting the debt or not, maybe selling the club and writing off the debt is a more tax efficient way of getting his money. But it's like, if I sold you the club for $1.5 billion and made you repay that $1.5 billion debt, then it's cost you $3 billion. Or I write off the debt and sell you the club for $3 billion. Same shit at the end of the day. So I think it's just a case of the way it's dressing it up.
That doesn't make sense to me.
And also, no, but it's like you take on the debt or you pay a larger asking price for the business.
So isn't that then 1.5 billion asking price or 3 billion asking price?
Well, exactly. That's it's a bit of massaging what it's worth. I think the other stat that they didn't, or a bit of information they didn't share with that 1.5 billion debt is the asset value at Chelsea. So say he's got a debt of 1.5 billion, but the majority of that money was towards players. and you went through Chelsea's squad and valued the players, I bet there's at least $500 million or more in value there.
Definitely.
Loads of value. So if you write the two off against each other, what's it worth? What's Chelsea's squad worth? I haven't actually done the
calculations.
The maths. There's probably on like Transfer Market or something on one of these websites.
Yeah,
really? So there's assets against this debt as well, and how much of it is because the majority of his investment's gone into on the pitch, and their squad on paper's got serious value. I mean, 2 great goalkeepers, all of the defensive assets. You look at the list of assets, and there's at least 8 or 10 £50 million players in there.
Yeah, listen, when you're saying £500 million, that's probably the minimum we're talking about. I've just spent £100 million on a player last summer who won't even start, right? So, did you know that Abramovich has not been going to Stamford Bridge basically for 4 years now?
It's been a while that he's not been allowed in. And then obviously he operates off his Israeli passport. So there have been visa issues for a little while.
Yeah.
I mean, it was when he first mooted the idea of selling the club.
So there was this, it's believed that it was, and this is not confirmed, there was the incident in Salisbury with the spy who was poisoned.
Yeah.
And that happened around about the same time Abramovich was looking to renew his visa.
Yep.
And they just kept putting it off in the same way the Premier League just kept putting off the Newcastle takeover because of the kind of beIN Sports TV deal, where it seems like it would pass that off. Where it believed there was already at that point, back then, being restrictions potentially placed on Russians gaining citizenship within the United Kingdom, and again potential links between Abramovich and the dictator of Russia. He tried to get citizenship in Switzerland, I believe, and was denied, I read, and has ended up donating around about, I think, £50 million roughly to various commitments in Israel to gain citizenship there, which he could do anyway because he's Jewish. The only way he could come to the UK was he could still come here and gain like a visa that was kind of up to 6 months or so temporarily, but couldn't gain permanent access to the UK anymore. It's also believed that one of the reasons he wasn't attending Stamford Bridge was because his own security was becoming a lot more dangerous.
Okay.
And it really alerted people when he didn't turn up to the FA Cup final in 2018 when they beat Manchester United at Wembley. That sent alarm bells ringing that why was he kind of no longer attending? It's partly because of the visa issue, but he has certainly still been. It's not that Abramovich has stopped caring about Chelsea.
No, of course, he's still very heavily influential.
He's still very heavily involved. You've got Maria, her surname's quite long. But she's being praised all over the place as a really top negotiator, and Bruce Buck are kind of running the day-to-day operations. But I think it's Marina actually rather than Maria, isn't it? Apparently she speaks to Abramovich every single day.
Yeah, multiple times.
So last Saturday, not the one gone, but 10 days ago, you and I were out on the piss, a bit drunk, and during the Everton Man City game, the news dropped. He was intending to pass the football club over to the trustees of Chelsea, 6 individuals, which includes Bruce Buck, also includes the women's manager, Emma Hayes, and was going to give them care and stewardship of Chelsea Football Club. Why did he try and do that?
Probably in the hope that he didn't have to then sell the club. If he was seen as not having control of the football club, they might have left it be. But clearly that wasn't going to pass.
So that's very quietly died because the trustees weren't
having it
comfortable in terms of them being implicated, to their links to Abramovich, their links to Russia, etc., which is completely understandable. Supposedly when the 6 people were informed, according to The Athletic, 2 of them immediately said, no, we're not doing that. And the other 4 were opposed in terms of they wanted to go away and do their own research and see if it was viable, because I think technically under charity law you couldn't do that, for example. Was that a panic move?
Yeah, definitely.
It seemed like the announcement was made before he'd actually even told these people
that it was going to happen and that he'd got their buy-in. Yeah,
and
agreed.
the statement at the time was pretty shite in terms of the fact he didn't make any reference to
long.
and made no reference to what was going on in Ukraine, which was then amended somewhat, but not kind of ideally, with the announcement that then followed this Saturday that just came on the eve of the Carabao Cup final, No, that was the night before the Carabao Cup final. When was the statement that he's definitely selling the club?
This weekend before
Was this
Burnley.
weekend?
Well, a few days before Burnley.
Yes, before Burnley, correct. What happens if Abramovich's assets get frozen before he sells Chelsea Football Club?
That's a real problem. I'm sure they're going to make some sort of exceptions to the rule. But they can still operate. I think he just won't be able to buy and sell players, potentially, or buy and sell the football club. But the business can't just stop operating. There's lots of people reliant on
So explain to me
salaries.
how that... If his assets are frozen, right, presumably he can't
do anything.
He can't pay the staff, or...
No, he'll be able to pay the staff, I'm sure.
How does that work?
He probably... I'd assume that the company ownership will be frozen. He can't buy and sell the company. He probably can't benefit from the proceeds of the company if it makes a profit. He probably can't pay himself any dividends. And he probably can't have any operational control or involvement in the company. But it wouldn't make sense for the government to be going around freezing assets but stopping business operating. I mean, imagine how many people work at Chelsea. 1,000. So all of them to suddenly not be getting a paycheck at the end of the month because Roman Abramovich's assets have been frozen. I don't think the government would get away with that one. So the business still has to operate, but I think that freezing of his assets will mean he can't buy and sell certain things, and definitely, like in this case, sell the football club. He can't benefit from the proceeds of the football club, and he probably can't have any control of the football club. That's what it would look like.
So if he can't sell the football club, what happens to the football club?
He still owns it, but he can't sell it, and
he can't do anything with it.
Eventually, all of these frozen assets will have to be unfrozen because they're generally individually owned by people. And to make the case to freeze Chelsea Football Club because of Abramovich, because of some tie to Putin, it's a bit of a stretch. I don't think it'd pass in the court of law.
So if let's say they were frozen in terms of transfer market and stuff, and the club presumably you could still pay the staff, etc., but presumably they couldn't receive like transfer fees and stuff.
Yeah, perhaps.
So what would happen then in the case? And we know this. Say the magic A word on transfers that I can never pronounce.
Amortization.
Thanks very much. So let's say Chelsea owed transfer fees on players.
They'd still be able to collect those.
Yeah. So how does that work? I mean, if you're
The
frozen,
contract's
you're
already
frozen,
done.
right?
No, I just think they would maybe put a transfer embargo on buying and selling players, or only spend what you receive in. They'd come up with the sanctions that would make sense. But as we said at the beginning, I don't think we'll get there. I think he will end up selling the club. There's going to be plenty of people that want to buy it, right? It's a prime asset. It's won more trophies in the last 25 years than any other British club.
One of the dangers for Chelsea here must be that a chancellor's going to come in here and look at them as an investment.
Well, whoever buys them will look at them as an investment. Abramovich stands very uniquely as a owner who cared more about the team than the books. Like, they're so rare. And I understand, like, it was not on really what the Chelsea fans breaking into chant at Burnley during the Ukraine minutes. But you can understand why he's loved so much at Chelsea, because we all have issues with our owners at some point, and they don't with him, because he always put trophies and winning stuff above everything else. And most new owners don't. So I think it's inevitable that whoever comes in will not treat it like a toy the way that Abramovich
I definitely have, I think now you've brought it up, it's worth saying because it was something way to cover. I definitely have some sympathy at the moment for Chelsea fans in terms of how they're probably dealing with this. I think, quite clearly the singing during the minutes applause or silence at the weekend at Burnley, like, is not on, right? You just don't do that. We wouldn't do it if Thomas Tuchel spoke so well after the game. You wouldn't do that if someone had died and stuff. Like, it's completely inappropriate in terms of the timing, and it's probably not on at the moment generally for Chelsea fans to be going around chanting his name just anyway. But I also get the tear on them, because they would not have had the last 20 years they've had as a set of football, as a football fan base, if this individual hadn't given them everything that he's given them. So I completely understand their love for him, in the same way we spoke with like Newcastle fans. You can't expect them to suddenly, and same with Man City fans. You can't expect them to just suddenly stop supporting their football club because who the owners are. You still support the shirt, you still support the badge, etc. And that applies to Chelsea fans now. And I don't think Chelsea fans should feel guilty that they've still got love in their hearts for Abramovich. It's probably just right now, just keep that within your own walls rather than doing it publicly would be the advice. What do you see next for Chelsea then?
Oof.
I mean, right now they're one of the biggest football clubs in the world.
Yeah.
Probably a little bit unfortunate that Manchester City and Liverpool are so bloody good at the moment and have been for the last couple of years. What do you foresee for Chelsea in the next couple of years and a bit longer? Do you see them maintaining as a power?
Yeah. One thing that they have, which is a massive asset, is the youth setup. It's a absolute money-making machine. Not only money-making, churns out really good talent as well. And that's going to have at least, I'd say, 8-10 years legacy in it. So for the next 8 to 10 years, for sure, they'll, if nothing else, churn out talent they can make a profit on. And every now and then a few will make it into the first team. And so for the foreseeable, I can see that. When it comes to longer than that, I mean, how often the team's dominant for such long periods? It doesn't happen for decades and decades very often. So maybe things will fade. Maybe it'll be an American investment company, and then it will definitely be treated much more like an investment in business. Although there was talk about a Swiss billionaire who was quite interested and.
I'm
always beware of these kind of people.
As soon as people come out in public, wasn't the guy like 84 or something?
It's not interesting.
I'm always very skeptical when people come out with public kind of interest in clubs. I think Daniel Ek, obviously, with Arsenal came out very publicly and stuff. And I think that was a rare case where it was like, look, cards on the table.
He's a fan as well.
Players want to be involved. And obviously, the way his brand, Spotify, has obviously grown massively, has kind of been out there. I get that. When you get these people suddenly surface, what was the guy I was telling you about? It was like a former fighter who was linked with buying Derby. We spoke about that, didn't we?
Boxer.
Yeah, it was just pure publicity, wasn't it? To just get his name linked with a football club. And I'd be a little bit cautious with that. I think it's probably for Chelsea fans is a really nervous period because you've got no idea what you want. In most cases, when a football club change hands, I think it's either because someone wants to pay the value asking price of the football club, or in many cases, obviously, the ownership gets handed out in kind of, say, like the Mike Ashley fashion, which has obviously happened over a long time.
Financial distress situation as well.
This has come with Chelsea fans, obviously, very understandably, would not want to lose Roman Abramovich. And obviously, all the noise within Chelsea is that they'll try and make sure whoever comes in and it still has the club at heart, etc., and wants to take it forward in a similar fashion. Ain't no guarantee of that, is there? No one's going to buy the football club and say, yeah, by the way, I'm going to ruin it.
No.
My idea will be to try and make an investment on this in the next couple of years by just asset stripping it and stuff like that. And you mentioned that, right? We spoke about the value of the players there. You could.
Yeah,
you could.
Definitely.
I think it's really difficult to foresee, considering Abramovich and Chelsea were having so many issues with the feasibility of building a new stadium. It's difficult to envisage how someone else is going to come in and know that has to be a priority, right?
Yeah.
You have to look at the other London clubs, Tottenham, Arsenal, West Ham, all above 60,000. Chelsea cannot still be sitting there on 42,000, I think it is, in 15, 20 years' time. Something has to happen. And it's really awkward because of the ownership of the CPO. It's the Chelsea Pitch Owners, I think, which basically means that Chelsea Football Club needs to stay within Stamford Bridge, I believe. Right. So they can't just go, right, we're going to build a new stadium in Surrey, for example, or something like that. Because of obviously where they are, land-wise, is really difficult. Underneath Stamford Bridge Stadium runs the tube line, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just a straightforward build. I mean, Tottenham's wasn't a straightforward build, but didn't have the kind of infrastructure around it in terms of being right at the heart of, I mean, it's a stone's throw from London's West End and stuff, isn't it, right? And obviously with the transport network around there, it's not easy just to
build a new stadium.
It's going to cost an absolute fortune. Whoever takes over the football club, that's got to be one of the priorities for the club, is to sort out the stadium issue. I don't know who wants to take that on, because it seems like if it's going to remain at Stamford Bridge, it's still going to be like a £2 billion project.
Yeah, it's going to
be. So who pays $3 billion and then puts that $2 billion on top? I mean, Abramovich is worth $10.6 billion. I would look at that right now and say if whoever's buying Chelsea is worth less than that, it's not necessarily a good thing. So there's a limited amount of people who can physically buy the football club, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Do you think we could see a company like a Spotify or an Amazon show an interest very suddenly?
That would be really interesting, wouldn't it?
It would.
Amazon owning a football club.
I think eventually this is the way it's going to... I've kept saying to you, I think this might be what
The
happens
thing is,
with
though,
Tottenham in the longer term.
It's already happened, right? Red Bull own Leipzig, Salzburg, New York. So there's a company already that's building a brand around owning sports teams.
Do you think if Red Bull...
Red Bull Chelsea, imagine that.
It's
coming.
If Red Bull bought Chelsea, there's no way that would happen.
Red Bull Chelsea, can you imagine?
Honestly.
I'll be Chelsea.
It just wouldn't happen. The people wouldn't allow for it to happen here.
No,
I'm
I agree
certain
that they wouldn't rename it. But in terms of a company owning a sports team, we've already seen it, right? Who doesn't remember TNS in Wales, Total Network Solutions, wasn't it?
Go on, tell me the story.
That's a football team called TNS, Total Network. They used to pop up always in the early rounds of the FA Cup.
In the FA Cup, I think maybe the Champions League and stuff, preliminary rounds, obviously.
Total Network Solutions.
Yeah, I have heard of them.
It was just literally, that was their sponsor.
Oh, they really?
There was a company called Total Network Solutions, and they sponsored.
I just thought that was a really funny football team name.
No,
I'd never give that
exactly
any thought.
Companies can own football teams, yeah. But in this scenario, there's not that many that. I mean, Amazon is the only one that I could think would want to do it. Perhaps a betting company might turn around and say they want to own a football team, but I think there would be very, very interesting rules around that. I mean, they're happy for betting companies to be plastered all over shirts and billboards, but they're not happy for a team to be owned by.
But that's the subject we're going to have to come back to, because they're trying to get something passed off by law where that's going to go, isn't it?
Yeah, then you've got the likes of the Amazon. You can't see like these tech companies like Apple. They're not going to be interested in owning a football team. There's not going to be that many that could afford it. Microsoft, Google.
I'm not as convinced as you that a sale's even going to happen.
It's the speed, James, that's making me think, oh, they genuinely are serious. I mean, I fully get the smokescreen that it could be, and that Abramovich, he doesn't want to sell. He doesn't want to sell Chelsea. I think he's being forced to sell Chelsea.
I just think that
if there's the opportunity for him to wangle out of it and keep the club, I'm with you. I think he will, but I think he's getting a lot of if it's probably wise, mate, kind of advice.
The touch would pray would be that Putin withdraws what he's doing.
Yeah,
I know that's difficult to envisage at the moment, but if he did. And let's say even if that's in 3 months' time or something, and Chelsea haven't found a buyer for a football club, and Abramovich's assets haven't been frozen, it just carries on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that could still be what happens. You've said this is not going to be a long process, but you got an inkling that he's been told you've got a certain amount of time, right?
Yeah, although I mean, I'm not sure why he's not on the list of oligarchs that's had sanctions put on, and I think because he's got influence, he's bought himself time. Not a lot. Weeks more than months, but bought himself a bit of time to try and because the rumours are he's got £200 million worth of property in London that he's trying to offload as well at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. How much is his yacht worth? Does that count as well? Is he under restrictions for that?
The one group, let's call it, that hasn't got an investment in football that I'm surprised by yet is the Chinese in the Premier League. I'd be really, because if you're talking about wealthy parts of the world, you've got the Middle East.
I think Chinese involved with Villa, aren't they? I think.
Is there Chinese ownership at Villa?
So, yeah.
Okay.
And I think there might be a couple of others as well. In fairness, more minority stuff. I'm sure that the guy, forgive me if I'm wrong, in charge of Villa, their major backer is Chinese.
Right. Okay.
I think.
Interesting. I thought they still had the American influence there at the ownership, but considering the financial powerhouse
they might be getting
China
restricted
is,
yet, aren't they?
Well, that's it. But I could see like a Chinese investment. I mean, there's definitely people wealthy enough, and there's no real Chinese influence other than Villa, like you're saying. It's not massive in the Premier League. That would be interesting to see some money come from over there. And Chelsea would be very desirable. I mean, it's the posh part of London, isn't it?
There is that, but I keep coming back to the stadium thing. In terms, you know, when you buy an investment for that amount of money, it's why Levy wants a similar price for Tottenham, right? But then it's done. It's done, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're buying Chelsea for the same price, and then you've got to put the investment into the stadium, etc. And we know Chelsea are an elite club. It's got the recent historical stuff, etc. And where it is in London,
Trophies, basically.
of course. Well, no, and to be honest, when Abramovich bought the football club, that's really what interested him as well in terms of where it was in terms of London. It's interesting you say about Abramovich is not on this list at the moment. So there is a list where loads of Russians have already been restricted.
Yeah.
Because I've heard it coined London lately as Moscow on Thames because of the amount of rich Russian people there are invested, particularly in Westminster,
West London and that
which
kind of area. Knightsbridge,
not far from
Mayfair.
Knightsbridge is also where kind of Harrods is and stuff is around the corner from Chelsea Football Club. So a lot of them already have been restricted, right?
Some have, yeah. There's restrictions on some.
So it does beg the question then, why not? That's what makes you think that he's been given time,
He's
right?
been given a bit of time, get it done. And then when the news broke, obviously Richard Masters' press conference saying that he was glad that Abramovich had come out with that statement and it was the right decision, makes me think the Premier League want him to sell. Otherwise he wouldn't say that. The Premier League want him to sell Chelsea, I think.
Is it against the government's interest to asset freeze essentially Chelsea Football Club?
Is it against their interest? Probably. I mean, yeah, they'd earn less in tax probably, but their end game is quite different. It's not about getting money in through revenue receipts on tax. It's about stopping a war. So
in Parliament, have they named names?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a list you can go online and which Russians have sanctions against them right now.
Because last week, Keir Starmer was the leader of the opposition to Boris Johnson. He, first question, wasn't it, one day in Parliament, he said, why haven't you, Abramovich? And Boris Johnson said, I won't discuss individuals. But other individuals have been discussed?
Well, it's not that they've been discussed. They're just, there's a list of people that have been sanctioned.
It's fascinating, mate. The whole world is murky as, isn't it? And football is a part of that.
So murky. Back to what we spoke about at the beginning of the show is that, I mean, if it's such a problem now, it should have been a problem at the beginning when he first took over the club. Having said that, I mean, he revolutionised his investment and his money over the last 19 years spurred so much other investment and money into the game, which then has been part of the reason why it's grown exponentially and is the product that it is now. Like Abramovich was one of the first pioneers in that of the growth into millions and billions in terms of the Premier League. You've got to give him, I don't know if his credit's the right word, but give him the credit for making that happen for sure. He was responsible for a large part.
I don't think you can't not credit what he has done for Chelsea Football Club.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And that's why I completely get the conflicting for Chelsea fans don't need to be pillared for how they feel about him. Just keep it within your circle, I think, at this stage, right? Because it's going to be very regretful if more stuff does come out, and I think it feels undeniable to me that there are certain links there. Otherwise he wouldn't be running, would he?
No.
If he had nothing he'd go, well, no, it's nothing to do with me, surely.
Yep.
But we know that there's rumours of he was at birthday parties with Putin's and stuff, so there's certainly links, and we're going back a long way here. I think 1999 birthday party was what I'd read, going back a long way, but there are undeniable links as far as I can see. Whether he's still involved, I mean, that's the other thing where I think a lot of people want the asset kind of blockages. What happens to the money that he gets, and what is he going to do with it? Which has got people scared as well.
He's got this charity that he's going to set up for the net proceeds. So, people are saying he says the victims of the war in Ukraine, Russian soldiers will be victims of the war in Ukraine. Yeah. So there's no kind of specifically that it's going to end up in Ukraine versus even being back in Russia. So
I have some,
people are
I have
very
some
skeptical.
sympathy for Russian soldiers who probably don't have a choice with what they're doing.
Yeah, it's very skeptical about where the people are very skeptical about where he's going to send this money, and it's all a bit vague, and the charitable trust and whatever else. But we'll see how it pans out in the next few weeks, really. And I think you're right. What Putin does might have an influence on what ends up happening here.
Yeah, I think if the situation improves, it's difficult to say it can't get worse, but unfortunately, I don't think it possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
But if the situation obviously massively improves, then I genuinely would not be surprised we're sitting here in a year's time and he's still technically in the owner of Chelsea Football Club. I just don't think it's that easy to find the right buyer for Chelsea, and that's where the real concerning bit for Chelsea is. Obviously, over time, you do this and find the right buyer. If he's being pressured for time, he might not, right? No. And then that can go either way for Chelsea as a football club.
Yeah. There we go. That's your people's poll for today, looking at Roman Abramovich and what might happen at Chelsea in the coming weeks and months. Tomorrow we've got Sky Fantasy Football, James. So, yeah, seeing who's making moves and not. Harry Kane captain yesterday?
Yeah.
So did everyone.
And I bought Sonny.
Oh, you did, yeah? Doubling up for the short run.
I went for it, yeah.
Nice.
Which means I'm going to be very undercooked of Chelsea assets, which we'll talk about tomorrow.
Good. And for patrons today, we are going back to the Champions League, Fantasy Champions League, and seeing if I can extend my lead on James.
Nobody who's listened to that podcast can tell you how Suj is above. Well,
I was above you before last week.
So
I was already.
Yeah, I know.
I'm only maintaining a lead.
Because you took that hit for Goncalves in the group stage,
which you told me to do. So we know where the credit goes. So if you wanted additional content, patreon.com/Planet FPL, as you probably already know, and we'll be back at you tomorrow. Look after yourselves. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man, child.